Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, and we're back with Tom Neumark, founder of one of Maryland's top-ranked charter schools. Today we're talking about a reality no parent can ignore. School board elections are coming fast, and if the wrong people win, our kids will keep getting fed classroom activism instead of academics. Parents are being protested, even threatened by Antifa, simply for speaking up for their children. This is the fight for our schools and their future. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And with us again is a returning guest, Tom Neumark. Thank you very much, Tom, for being here. Tom,
Thanks for having me.
The founder of the Frederick Classical Charter School, among many other bona fides. We are just happy to have you tonight. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
So why don't you tell our viewers, catch them up on exactly, what you've been doing and what's going on with you?
Sure. So I've been working a lot in Frederick County, trying to spread the word about the need to vote in Board of Education races and trying to inform the public about the issues. A lot of the parents that we talk to don't realize all the crazy stuff that's going down in our schools. They need to obviously tune into your podcast, and we're trying to inform them.
You know, speaking of crazy stuff going on in our schools, I recently saw a protest down in Frederick that you were unfortunately the object of, along with some other parents, where there was some Antifas, I guess. They were Antifas. They were masked up.
They look like it.
Yeah, they had lots of signs that were urging violence and so forth. What was the whole story behind that particular incident? Could you give us the 411 on that?
Yeah, so the Board of Education is revising its policy on supporting transgender students. And so the current policy leaves parents out of the equation. We were coming as a group of parents to say we should be part of the equation. We should be informed, and our daughters should not have to compete against boys and have boys in their bathrooms. And we just think this is not a good idea. And the other side brought these folks dressed in Antifa garb. I don't know if they were Antifa officially or what, that some of them seem older, some of them seem younger. But there was a whole group of protesters that interrupted our speech. We brought some folks that were running for office to speak. Some of us tried to speak, and we were just shouted down. I'm sure you have the clip of it. We were just shouted down by the other side.
Yeah, we actually interviewed Chris Burnett, who was also there. He's running as a delegate, right? He's running for delegation, and he said it was a very scary situation. But he also said that basically nobody was speaking against trans rights. They were, of course, speakers were all affirming that parents needed a say in the educational system, which I guess ticked off a lot of people.
Yeah, this should be not controversial at all, but it's become the position of the Democratic Party and the Frederick Democratic Socialists, and obviously whoever these Antifa people are, that parents are the problem, right? Instead of viewing parents as partners, we view them as problems, and they must be protested. And we're at a sad place when that's what people are thinking.
And the intensity and the danger of it can oftentimes be almost understated, I think, just because people don't want to inherently understand or believe that their children's rights can be violated in our public schools, something that all of us have experienced, and 99% of people up until just a few years ago had all positive experiences from. But just last week, one of the school board members that is in support of schools being able to make decisions for children without parental consent, without parental knowledge, in other words, helping children act in secrecy. What he was saying at a board meeting, and again, this was simply last week, was that if children are not sharing information with their parents, then it is their parents' fault, and it then becomes part of the responsibility of the schools to step in and to make those decisions for children, because obviously the parents are deficient in some way. Now, I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, but I would encourage anyone to go back to that board meeting last week and listen to what is said. So how long has this been going on for without parents being aware of it?
Well, it started about 7 or 8 years ago. They passed the policy, but then shortly after that, we had COVID. So we were away from school for a while. And after we came back from COVID, back to in-person school, parents started realizing that this was a problem. And I actually started to write a newspaper article about it, and that's what got me interested in the topic. I did research on it, and the more I dug, the more I realized this is really a bad idea. There's no evidence that supports this, and I was quite frankly surprised. I assumed that there was some research that had supported this. I hadn't really delved in the issue before. And the moment you raise that, you are persona non grata, right? To the folks on the left in the school board, they're not interpreting the science correctly, and there's a problem with you. They immediately start to attack you, question you, which is really unfortunate. The amount of names and accusations that people throw at all these parents is beyond the pale.
That is the de facto defense of people on the far left who have no argument. They have no facts. What they do is they attack. They use pejoratives, insults that raise hackles, Nazi, transphobe, homophobe, whatever they can do to generate support for them and opposition to the fact bringers. I mean, you don't have to be red or blue, Democrat or conservative or liberal or Republican to know that parents not being invested in their children and knowledgeable what's going on is a bad idea.
It's a really bad idea, and it's unfortunate. Yeah, Hillary Cass from the UK, she was commissioned by the British government to research this trans issue. She spent 4 years looking into it and concluded there was no evidence, just like all the other countries did. She can no longer take public transportation because of threats to her life, just because she didn't find evidence. It's crazy. So that's where we are. But the violence is, as you guys have talked about, like, it's not just the adults. I mean, the kids are having some unfortunate things going on in the schools these days too. It's really unfortunate.
What do you mean when you say the kids are having? You mean the kids that are basically taking a position that opposes the trans agenda?
Well, so not so much that. I was thinking more of like the fights we had talked about, some of the sexual assaults and some of the things that happened here in Frederick County. There was a student that was assaulted with an adult toy, and that's crazy.
On
and
multiple occasions, by the way, it turned out it was on multiple occasions.
Yeah, apparently on multiple occasions. We had fights, growing up. I think you guys all had the after school fights now and then, but it's not like it is now. It's very different. If you've watched the videos of the kids in Montgomery County, I mean, these are brutal fights where they're just kicking somebody's teeth when they're down. I mean, it's awful. So we're seeing this all over, this raging violence in our kids.
Where do you think it's coming from? If you were to assign kind of the responsibility that the school system has, as many parents, but even teachers have come to school board meetings and said, we really need the school board to change this policy and this policy and this policy back to what it's always been before. To what extent do you think the schools bear responsibility for this violence, including the sexual assaults that we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think there's multiple factors. I think you have a breakdown of the family largely, in the broader culture. So that's part of it. These types of things would not be tolerated in a healthy family. You would not be raising kids to do this. Even kids that come from families that are raised with strong values can do these things, of course, and always have, but not like we're seeing now. I mean, this is a lot of fights getting captured on video. Part of it is the video is encouraging kids to, they want to capture the moment or whatever. And we're seeing more of it. Like, we may not have seen as much, growing up, we didn't have cell phones to capture that. But also I think that the culture in general, education culture is very therapeutic, right? We talked about the restorative practices last time. There's an emphasis on that. Bringing back just good old-fashioned discipline, I think, is needed. A lot of this went by the wayside under the Biden administration. I think we talked about this last time, and I think that's part of it. I don't know if there's a policy. You've probably heard this saying before. I would look at it this way. People are policy, if you've ever heard that phrase. And so it's really up to, no matter what's written on paper, the principals and the teachers and the adults in the room need to be the adults in the room and not just laugh if this kid's bringing this adult toy around and ignoring it, right? And I don't know what happened specifically in that case, but I think this, you don't want a no tolerance policy, but you want to be ennobling these kids. You want to be asking them to aspire to be a better person than they were yesterday. And I don't know that that's the direction of our culture anywhere in America. It's more like, well, whatever you feel is who you are, and it's very permissive, and we need to get back to just good old-fashioned common sense.
Common sense is gone. We're too busy affirming these students' emotions and thoughts and feelings instead of helping them to a place of self-control and self-discipline.
Yes. And this learned helplessness, like you are a victim and the world is an oppressive place. And then I know it's meant to be a noble effort by some that to talk about prejudice, and certainly we should talk about the history of slavery and things like that. But there can also be a thing where you talk about it too much and people see racism and oppression everywhere where it doesn't exist. It's like this learned prejudice that everything is prejudice. It's like its own sort of prejudice, right? Like they just read racism and homophobia and all these other isms into everything because they've been taught that. And they would never interpret every little micro expression and little gesture and turn of phrase as being something offensive. But I think there's something to this idea that we've made kids hypersensitive, not just sensitive and aware, but hypersensitive.
We were taught the history of slavery. The difference today seems to be that it is what you're saying. There is the overemphasis on the idea of victimhood that is so strong that it almost seems to give an impression to children that growth isn't possible. So I myself, I'm dyslexic. Now, I received a lot of help in my elementary school years to no longer be dyslexic. There was a group of parents who are actually highly effective that deal with helping children with dyslexia in our public schools. And then there were a number of dyslexic students that they had to come in and talk. And one of the students, she said she had started to overcome her dyslexia and then started to fall back into it because dyslexia is a condition that doesn't go away. Now, I was horrified as someone who was dyslexic and went through the various struggles to overcome it, along with many people that I know. Dyslexia, I would describe as a little bit like riding a bike. It may make reading a little bit more natural, like riding a bike, but once you learn how to ride the bike, you always know how to ride the bike. In order for this very intelligent child to believe that she couldn't truly overcome, but was destined to slip back into it, I mean, it's an absolute cancer of the mind. And it is in so many areas of our public schools. The more and more I learn, talk to individuals like you, talk to parents, it is just taken over the culture of our public schools.
It's the trigger warnings, right? I mean, it's everything's going to hurt me. We're raising kids to think that they're fragile. It's this learned fragility, and it's not healthy for anyone. I'm all for being sensitive and compassionate, but you also have to realize that most things in life are not going to hurt you permanently. You're going to grow from them. What's the saying that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger? There's a lot of truth in that. Like we used to be the 80s, I think, were the suck it up generation, right? Like, yeah, that's tough on you. Just learn from it. And I think some of that needs to be brought back, right? I think we need to be able to have kids that realize that it's okay to be in pain temporarily. It's okay to fail. It's okay to lose. Like these are just parts of life. And you realize that you don't need to have your emotions placated if those things happen. Like you're going to feel sad for a day if you lost the baseball game, and maybe you're fine the next day. So I think some of those normal things that I think we develop, if we don't try to placate these kids, we don't try to wrap them in cotton all the time, we can actually make them stronger.
Yes. The problem I see also is that we are teaching these children to be a victim, stay in victimhood, and not learn how to overcome obstacles that are coming in life.
Yeah.
Life is tough. There are going to be disappointments. There's going to be all sorts of crazy stuff going on. We're not teaching these kids to overcome any of it. Psychology's moved into a whole new location where they're trying to work people through trauma and to the other side, not dwell in it, ruminate on it. There's study after study that says the people who ruminate on their issues and problems become more depressed, more sad, more dysfunctional. And that's exactly what we're doing to our kids.
Yeah, well, we have check-ins in Frederick County. You can go and check in multiple times per week using the software program. The software will ask you all kinds of questions like, how are you feeling today? Have you thought about killing yourself? Like crazy things. And it's just not appropriate.
That essentially, another one of those issues, I should say, that really no one is aware of, but the insidiousness of it. What happens is that there is an app that children can download onto their cell phones. Their parents don't necessarily know about it at all. And then I believe it's twice a week or twice a month, but
something like that. You can set the frequency. I think the frequency the student can set, but they will give them time to go and use this. I think it's at least accessible via a Chromebook. It may be part of an app on your phone. I'm not sure. But definitely they can log on at home as well. I mean, it's a website for sure. So they could get to a website from their phone as well. And yeah, they ask them mental health questions. And Abigail Schreier wrote this book called Bad Therapy, which is a great book, where she said, look, constantly asking these kids to perseverate, just like you said, Mark, about their mental health causes them to be more depressed. If a child is depressed and needs help, the parents are probably going to know most of the time, not always, and be able to deal with it. But you just don't want to get in the habit of constantly asking, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling now? Like that just makes you think about it, right? And get sadder and sadder. So we need to have kids not be hyper concerned about their own feelings and act like feelings really are so important. Like you have a bad feeling, we have to talk about it.
Our educational system are professional at making an altar for people to worship their feelings.
Yeah.
And the kids worship them more and more and more, and that's all that becomes real.
And the title from Abigail's book, which I thought summarized it, she said, I was full of compassion and mad as hell. And I thought that really describes a lot of kids I know these days. Not all of them, but it definitely describes. They've been told, be compassionate, be concerned, but really what a lot of these kids want, they want adults to be adults. They don't necessarily want the control. They want boundaries. People do better when they have boundaries. They know there's rules, expectations. There's something to aspire to beyond just your feelings. That's the place I'd like to get more kids to.
It's interesting to me that parents and educators take the easy path out. It's hard to brace a kid. It's hard to discipline a child. It's hard to set parameters and consequences and then enforce them. It's much easier to say, these were the consequences, but we're going to take that away from you, give you a fifth, sixth, or seventh chance, or whatever it is. Right. I mean, that's the easy route for educators and parents. And what it does is it makes a whole generation of kids who thinks that the world revolves around them.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think the decline of religion plays a role too. So, yeah, I mean, even if you weren't religious, the culture kind of had those values just inherent built in and the lack of religious influence that kind of seeped into how everybody was thinking, right? And so now that's not really part of it for a great many Americans. I don't know if I have to look and see how many Americans even have a religious belief, but I think we're headed to a bit of a revival on that, unfortunately. But I think that's very helpful. Again, even if you're an atheist, like being around people that share this idea that there is something beyond how you feel, there you are expected to have a higher standard of conduct. And, religion has always taught that.
But one of the things that has been coming out from a number of studies about the, quote, decline of Western civilization, right, where we've seen that in Western nations, the birth rate has dropped. But it's not just the birth rate has dropped. People have said that they are more depressed. They're more unhappy. Less people are getting married. Like these things that have always been associated with wellness and positivity, all of them are falling apart and in Western nations. And what studies are showing, apparently fairly consistently, is that when you have individuals where they associate their identity, they associate their time, perhaps is the more appropriate term, with their spouses, with their children, and with a religious outlook, with church. Those individuals on all levels, essentially, in surveys, rate themselves as happier, etc. And the alternative to that is really just one thing that consistently pops up. It is the belief that people associate their happiness or their time with the amount of government whether you want to call it dependence, or welfare, but the idea that government edicts can help our lives. That is what is associated with these declining metrics.
Yeah.
And and one of those three is religion. And I think that's very interesting, because you're right. Even if you have where many people may not have gone to church, but the culture itself held a concept that there is this good versus evil, and there is this direct connection we have with God that is guiding us to be better as we face the struggle, as we face the emotions. And if you're scared to face the emotions, then what you're trying, or to overcome the emotions perhaps, then what you're doing is you're trying to avoid them, which inherently leads to rumination, because no one can truly avoid their emotions. Either we learn and understand and grow, or we wallow, but we don't avoid.
Yeah, exactly. And what religion has taught is that we were made for greatness, but not for pleasure, right? Not we're going to struggle, but that's how you can achieve the greatness, right? And you're going to go through hard times, and it's okay. And so I think there was more of just an acceptance that the world's, like, all of us were taught by our parents, right? The world's not fair, like, just accept it, right? But you have a group of kids that are told, well, the world's not fair and it's the worst thing ever, and you should be really concerned about how you feel about it, and there's all this injustice. And there are ways to fight injustice. There's certain things that I think we could all agree are unjust at times, but turning folks into these like social justice warriors is just creating this dissatisfaction. And just to double down on your point, it's Gallup that has done that poll, right, since the 1970s. And they have found consistently the happiest people, the people that have the most friends, experience the most meaning in their lives, have the most satisfying relationship with their spouse emotionally and physically, right? Everything, go through every aspect of it, are conservative, religious Republicans, right? And so and it's been this way for decades.
I think it's where your anchor is. You either anchor in hedonism and self-satisfaction, or you anchor your ship in something greater and bigger than you, right? I mean, when we were kids, we were taught that self-denial, right, and self-control were, brothers in the same family, and that's the only place you got to success. These kids know nothing about self-denial. These kids are being raised with no self-discipline. I mean, you can see it time and time again in the schools. You can see these kids lashing out, angry, breaking things, assaulting people. They've not been taught self-control at home. So how in the world are they going to show self-control at school?
Right, exactly. And then even if they come from a home that's trying to do that, if their parents aren't good about, the phones, or even if they're trying to be and the kids get to the phones are not a great influence on our kids. I mean, I talked to parents a couple years ago. Their son had thrown a rock at my car, and I went to talk to the parents about it. And they said, yeah, they were really sorry. And they said, also, he's struggling because the kids on the bus are playing pornography through their phones. But there are just a lot of bad influences. And this is a family that's trying to raise their kid with traditional values and finding it to be a huge struggle, because the phone gives you easy access to bad things on the school bus.
Tom, it's an interesting thing. I actually have heard parents tell me that it's not their business what their children do on their phones. I mean, I have never heard a more insane comment from a parent than that right there. We want to give them their privacy. We want to give them their autonomy. They're children, and you are giving them a window to pornography, predators, crime. And you're going to leave them with this window wide open with no monitoring. We monitor all the time. We have Life 360 on our kids. We knew where they were every minute of every day. And I'm not saying my kids were perfect, far from it, but they knew their parents were going to bring the heat if they didn't behave in a certain particular way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we just need to start setting the bar. This notion of statesmanship, right, that that we should be studying in school, how Lincoln handled things was just the classic example. Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, like there are some really great examples.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, we used to be asking kids, who's your hero? Who do you look up to? Who do you want to be like? Hopefully a historical figure that actually did something important and noble.
And in regards to how this outlook is now on children and the value of emotions over the value of, I guess, let's say character. It's character versus emotions, right? And so a huge part of classic education isn't just reading, writing, math, science, and history. It is character development. That it's about overcoming our pleasures, right? Our base pleasures,
base instincts,
instincts. And but there's a philosophy that has popped up that that sounds academic and sophisticated in nature, but really just serves to justify rumination, wallowing in one's emotions. And it's called affirming care. And it's something that is oftentimes used by a number of people that claim to be mental health professionals, but not the kind that Mark was talking about, where he's referring to that group of mental health professionals that understands, and always has, by the way, understood that you have to continue to work and grow and learn how to master your emotions to be a tool to your service, not you being, thrown around in the wind by your emotions. And what the affirming care says, though, and it says it in very academic language, but these things are all very basic and straightforward. It says that what a child in particular, talking about children, what a child feels, you need to really let them feel it. You can't tell them it's wrong. You can't guide them to a different emotional state. You have to let them really understand the value of themselves that they find within their emotions almost. And that actually is where we started at the beginning here with the transgenderism, when transgenderism was defined very slightly, by the way, by the American Psychological Association back in 2013. That's what a lot of people said, is they said, the American Psychology Association is saying that we need to affirm the emotions or whatever statements children are saying if they say they're in the wrong body. But 4 years later, in 2017, the team of psychologists tasked with making that change back in 2013 on behalf of the American Psychology Association said in 2017, 4 years later, no, that's not at all what we're saying. And it has been completely ignored and has led to really the bulk of what we're talking about right now.
It's funny, the transgenderism and the movement to transition these kids has ceased everywhere in the world except here in the United States. All these Scandinavian countries that people referred to and said, well, they're doing it right over there. Well, they stopped it. They said no child will be transitioned legally until puberty has completed. The studies indicating overseas now are that most of those children, when they get through puberty, they don't want to transition anymore. The tragedy is these parents help their kids transition, sometimes with permanent physical disabilities, basically mutilations. And then the kid is growing up saying, wait a minute, maybe I didn't want this. Now what do I got to do? Right?
Yeah. Even 18 is really early. I think the age should be 25 because the brain's fully developed then. I know people will argue with me about that, but that's a common age for people who are considering transition to stop considering, because they come to terms with their biological sex and actually come to accept it. Very often they realize that they're gay or autistic or had other things going on that were driving the interest in transition, and they're often quite glad they didn't do it. There's a lot of happy gay guys that are glad they did not transition.
And I think one thing that we as conservatives need to get across to people is this: we are not unsympathetic to these children. We absolutely love them. We want them. If they turn out to be gay, fine. If they turn out to be a transgender as an adult, fine. That's them. That is their life. We as conservatives believe that. Don't mess with the kids. Leave
let them grow up
alone. Let them grow up. Kids change their minds every week on what they're doing. I mean, one kid's gay one week, the next week they're straight, and then it all, by the time they turn 18, nobody knows what's going on. The bottom line is we as conservatives need to make a better argument that we are compassionate people, we are loving people, we do want the best for these kids. It has nothing to do with bigotry or phobias or any of that other stuff that the left's trying to put on us. It really is an autonomy for parents and allowing children to be children.
100%. Yeah, and I think there needs to be, I hate to say offense, but we need to counter that narrative. like, I think some of the folks that are pushing this are very anti-parental rights, anti-traditional values. And it's fine. You don't have to agree with me about that. But just why is it like I wouldn't think of baptizing an atheist kid, right? But they'll be fine to change my kid's name without permission. It's like we would never do this to your kids. If you want to transition your kid and give the school permission, that's your prerogative as a parent. I don't think it's a good idea, but that's your prerogative. Why isn't it my prerogative to not?
Such a great analogy. If we, as a teacher, took a child of an atheist couple and secretly baptized them into Christ, could you imagine the firestorm from that?
Yeah, and rightfully so. It's not your right as a school to do that. But apparently it's your right to baptize them, so to speak, into the transgender belief system. And it is a belief system. I mean, that's why we get called all the names, because we've committed a heresy. Mm-hmm. And there are actually scholars that have looked into this and said, oh, it has a lot of rituals and there's days, right? Transgender Day of Remembrance and Transgender Day of Visibility. It has its own holidays. Like, it's a belief system, right? So
some people would say it's a cult.
Yeah. Some would argue it's a cult. And a lot of people that got out of the cults will describe it that way. They'll say, I really felt so loved, but I was not allowed to question the beliefs. But as soon as I did and realized this wasn't for me, I was kicked out. They said I was a horrible transphobic person. And this is someone who thought they were believed they were trans like a month before. And now apparently they're transphobic.
One child who is now an adult and had gone and been transitioned, and their process, they were now seeking to basically go back to their gender. And what they described is that fairly early on in the process, they started feeling pain, right? I mean, the treatments, blocking hormones and replacing hormones, even outside of surgery, they have genuinely large effects on the body. And so this individual was talking about how they were feeling pain pretty early on in the process. And they kind of were like second guessing the what was happening and what they were saying. But at school, and it was in school, the LGBT club community and the teachers that were the moderators for the LGBT club, there was so much positive energy that they were just getting, so much encouragement that that this individual saying that they felt like they couldn't say, but wait a second, there's something going on with me. And so they ended up going through the full process, and of course, in the end, irreversible, despite what they're attempting to have done to salvage themselves. But do you think that it's possible that what all of this is really about is who controls society and the children, the government or families?
Historically, it's always been the socialists that have wanted to have the children identify more with the state than with the family, right? So you look at Mao, you look at all the folks that have done this in history.
North Korea, Cambodia, every socialist regime goes after the kids.
They go after the kids and they turn the kids against the parents, report on your parents, right? Be loyal to us. So I do think, certainly with the Democratic Socialists, I mean, these are the folks that I kid you not, just posted like within a day or so, defending Antifa, the folks that got arrested from Antifa. They're defending them and saying we should go stand with them in court, I think tomorrow or something. I was like, you gotta be kidding. These are people who are doing violent things, committing illegal acts, got arrested. You should not be defending them. But again, there is this radical contingent that just is that way. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Mark. I think that's exactly it. There's definitely a radical fringe that we're hearing more from. I mean, you see it in New York City, right? The guy that's running there, the mayor. I mean, socialism's having a little bit of a moment in America right now. I don't think it's going to last too long, fortunately. I hope it won't. But they are. We're seeing them in Frederick County come out and endorse candidates, which they've never done. They have their socialist flag that they unfurled at the Board of Education when Antifa was there. So, yeah, there's definitely a radical fringe that believes exactly that. Mark, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me when I look at where we've come with socialism, and this is a failed ideology. It's failed wherever it's been tried, and the next generation thinks they're going to do it better. This time it's going to work, giving complete control of everything to the government, because the government is so efficient. They do such a great job of everything. Right. We're going to give it all up to them, and then of course the nanny state becomes real. Some people want to be taken
Yeah.
care of, made into infants.
And it's often these young kids that are troubled, right, that get into this and they just want some, they're struggling to find jobs. I get it. It's hard right now. And so I understand the appeal, but ultimately that ideology has killed millions of people. And it's not good for us. And it discourages innovation. We can go through the whole list. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like there is a group of kids, I think, that are really into this. And it happens in every generation, but it was never affirmed as much as it is now, right? Oh, it's okay that you're a socialist. Like that would be rejected, go back 40 years. I think that'd be pretty strongly rejected by anyone that lived through this. Yeah.
Sister Mary Frances would have hit me with a ruler right away.
Right?
No socialism. No socialism. Sister Mary Frances had a mean ruler. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Oh, I believe
we didn't act up in school. I can tell you that.
And the history of socialism is just horrific, right? It's been around, let's just say, 109 years, going back to the first socialist revolution in Russia in 1916, I guess maybe started from that moment. And it has been by far and away the largest source of death through not just wars, but through literal social revolution and really genocidal exterminations, dozens of countries around the world in the last 109 years. And even aside from that, there also is the fact that the economies fail. Economies of socialist countries are always 100% of the time, 100% of the time, as 109 years, worse after socialism than whatever it is that was being used to justify socialism before. And here's the other thing. The economies keep getting worse. They don't hit a bottom. In non-socialist economies, they have a tendency to have their bad times for sure. I don't know anyone who's ever been able to figure out a way to avoid that. But it kind of hits a natural bottom. It tends not to get, the suffering tends not to get worse. The economic malaise tends not to get worse. It goes back up. But in socialism, it just keeps heading downwards.
And to that point, Ethan, it's interesting to me that, socialists here in this country say, well, it's going to be a democratic socialism. It's a little different. Yeah, well, there are democratic socialism we can take an example from. It's called Europe. And if you look at Europe, right now, Mississippi is the 50th state in the union for GDP, 50th state in wealth. They have more wealth than the wealthiest country. Socialism does not work, and it hasn't worked for a long time. Hey, Tom, back to the point about raising generations of kids who are narcissistic. We have recently had a fairly young person who is a transsexual teacher in our region who was accused and charged with sexually abusing children in his care, his or her care, whichever gender they're assuming. This is the result we're looking at. Do you know anything about this particular subject, and would you like to share?
Yeah, I only know what's in the paper, which is really sad, and that this person was accused of this. I guess there are multiple reports of it from what it sounded like. This guy, there's a dad who testified his son was in the same classroom as this person. And he had been promised, his son is nonverbal. So he's the neediest of the kids with the special needs, right? He literally cannot talk, cannot speak. And so he has no way of explaining what happened to him. So this dad, before any of this happened 3 years ago, said, we really need to have cameras in classrooms, at least for these nonverbal kids, right? It's a very small group, but for their safety and really for the teacher's safety, so they won't ever be accused of, wrongdoing, let's do this. And the teachers union fought it, right? And won and said, well, we're going to walk out. We're not going to, this is ridiculous. And so now, that those kids could have all been protected by these cameras who were taught by this guy that was at Carroll Manor Elementary School. This is called out in the public testimony for at least a year. This is the other problem is the education establishments fight so many good things, right? There's a long list of things that the teachers union is fighting, including safety for kids.
The teachers union has already made it clear. I mean, the leaders, Randy Gardner, she has already stated publicly multiple times, and she'll stand on that hill, that parents do not belong in curriculum, that parents do have no business getting into the classrooms. These children were the most vulnerable in our system.
But I will tell you, some of the research on this, if there's someone who's interested in abusing children, they will do it in the room with the parents. Like, that's how bad some of these folks are, and they'll be tricky about it. So I don't want to let the school system off the hook, but these folks are very, very motivated to be sneaky. Yeah, it's usually heterosexual men are the most likely to do it. And it's often actually out of convenience than actual attraction, which is more sickening to me.
It's interesting because one of the things that this young man, he was 22 years old, said is, after he realized that he was caught and it was only a matter of time before the police came for him, he had written in his diary something to the effect of, "I'm sorry, I have become the monster that they thought I would be," and I certainly don't want to imply at all that that there is sympathy or an excuse for what he did. I don't believe that in the least. He's fully responsible. Right. With that being said, though, and in the context of what we've been talking about, throughout this conversation here, it begs the question. He is of an age where he spent a good portion of his adolescence under that guise of the affirming care, under the guise of no, your emotions are you. If he had grown up outside of that in normal times, where hey, continue to grow, continue to learn, or the group of psychologists that Mark had mentioned earlier were like, no, you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow, you're gonna overcome, you are going to be different and better. Would he have done this, or would his life have taken a very different, more positive turn?
And I don't know. It's that whole nature versus nurture thing. But I think in general, developing that discipline can help you could cope if that's an issue you're facing, right? I think begins with just discipline in other things like keeping your room clean and, your manners and all the normal things we were raised with. Set an expectation. Obviously, there are going to be some people that, for whatever reason, regardless of how strongly traditional culture is, they're going to do that. We've always had people that were unfortunately abusing children. But I do think it's helpful to have a culture that sets expectations and says some things are wrong no matter what you feel, and you've got to control that and set that as the expectation. And that mastery of self is the liberating thing. See, it's the opposite of what that we're told. We're told that the liberation comes from fully expressing and doing what you want, but it's actually overcoming those things that gives you the freedom, because then you have the freedom to make rational choices rather than being a slave to your emotion. That's sort of the inside out of what's going on here.
Tom, I think we have figured out why that charter school that you founded is the #1 charter school in Maryland.
I think there's a lot to do with it. We have a lot of kids that we emphasize that with, right? That's definitely part of the curriculum is, you're expected to achieve a standard, and you can do it. That's the positive news. You don't have to say, well, I don't feel up to it. Great. You don't have to feel up to it, but you can force yourself to act in a better way, and you'll get there. And, it's that old saying, right? Like you act your way into a habit, and the habit, Aristotle said, a habit is, if you can develop a habit of excellence, right? So you are what you repeat.
You are what you repeatedly do.
Yep. And therefore excellence is a habit. And we teach that. And by golly, those kids are getting 85 to 90% passage rate on the Algebra 1 exam, but the other schools aren't. They're getting a 75% failure rate. So it does matter. It's not going to solve everything, but this culture of I can do things, I can master myself, I don't think it's something we want to lose. And I'm really concerned we have to regain.
I think the elephant in the room for me is the lack of male leadership in homes. I really blame the lack of male leadership in our families anymore. I mean, whether they're single mothers who are raising kids or just men who are ineffective or in their own homes. I mean, look, being a father is a tough job. Being a husband's a tough job. It takes work, and people are lazy. They don't want to put the work in.
So true. It's so true. I see all the time, if you look at the Board of Education meetings, when people come out, it's the moms. Mm-hmm. Where are the dads? You get 50 dads to show up and say, hey, we're getting cameras in the classroom. This is what we're asking for. That would be a huge impact. right? I'm not saying moms can't be effective advocates. They're the only effective advocates. But where's the dads for liberty along with the moms for liberty, right? Why is it left to the moms? These dads, I think, really need to get involved in education. I understand women typically are the ones more interested in it, but the dads need to stand up as well. And most people don't realize that we're disproportionately female in the public schools by a lot. Like 90% of the staff are female. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There are professions where men are 90% of the staff. I'm not assuming any prejudice on either side, like the engineering groups or the school groups. But wouldn't it be great if more men were attracted to that profession? Because I remember my first male teacher, I was in 6th grade. Like I'd been to school it's my 7th year of schooling since kindergarten. And I was so excited. I'm like, oh, there's a guy teacher. Like I thought that was the greatest thing. Guys need role models too, right?
Mr. Hilton, 5th grade at Washington Elementary School in Beverly, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Made a huge impression on me. Taught me how to read, taught me how to love literature, taught me all sorts of incredible things.
Yeah, exactly. And
by the way, I never knew what his sexuality was because he would never talk about it.
Right. Remember when that was normal to not talk about it?
Yeah.
I
don't know anything other about Mr. Hilton other than he came to class and he taught me. I know nothing about him. Didn't know he was married, didn't know what his sexual proclivities were, didn't know if he voted Democrat or Republican. I didn't know any of that because all he was concentrating on was teaching a lunkhead like me.
Right.
Anyway.
And that's how it should be. We should be teaching the lunkheads like you and not, talking about the other stuff. Yeah, I totally agree. But this is a culture that we have to fight for if we want it back, right? I think that's a conversation we need to have.
Well, Tom, we want to thank you for coming out. It's always a pleasure to talk about a host of topics with you. We've covered a range of discussions tonight. I think every one of them was great. It was great to hear from you. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun, and let's do it again.
Hey, this has been this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host, Ethan Lowen. We want to thank Tom Neumark for being with us tonight. If you liked what you saw tonight, if you enjoyed the show, like it, share it with your friends or your enemies. We don't discriminate. And we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes. That wraps up this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. Huge thanks to Tom Neumark for standing up when so many stay silent. The Board of Education elections are coming like a freight train, folks. And if we don't get serious, schools will keep pushing ideology over reading, math, and discipline. Our kids deserve better. Like, follow, and share. And most of all, vote. Your children's future depends on it.